Well, greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and you knew this one was coming. What's probably a movie that's going to dwarf the competition? Yeah, bad pun, I know. Hobbit, or I should say, The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey, the first installment of what's going to be the Hobbit trilogy. Of course, directed by Peter Jackson, the same director of Lord of the Rings. And for those of you living in a rock or just completely ignorant, The Hobbit is the first of Tolkien's great novels. JRR Tolkien, who wrote Lord of the Rings, the novel, not the movie. The movie was based on his novel. Anyway, the Lord of the Rings was written years after he wrote his first introduction to Middle Earth, which was The Hobbit, which was basically his own take on mythology. His own. He was a professor of languages. He had studied mythology greatly, and he decided to basically create his own. And The Hobbit really does reflect that, where you can see it really is a tale that is written like it is a tale that you would find in history, like you would find from early mythology. And I think that might explain what some people might criticize The Hobbit for. Now, personally, I like the film. I don't think it was as good as the Lord of the Rings, and that was because of the tone. How Lord of the Rings had a very set plot. Not very well, it's a very set plot, but it was a very plot-oriented, goal-oriented film or story. You knew what the end goal was, but you could see it was going to be a difficult task, and you could see why people had to do certain things and why that stretched it out, because it was basically a war story. The Hobbit's a little different. The Hobbit is, you have a set goal right from the get-go. We're going to go to the Lonely Mountain, get the gold, take back Erebor. But it's a long journey just to get there. Kind of weird, because you kind of think of this travel in Lord of the Rings. They do a lot of traveling, but the traveling itself isn't the problem generally. And here it's just a weird stuff that you encounter along the way. But that's kind of the point. The Hobbit is a true adventure story. It's a story about somebody going out on an adventure. They've got an end goal, but it's all about the kind of crazy stuff you run across as you're trying to go and achieve that goal. Lord of the Rings, it was about basically war, and that's kind of reflective of when these two stories were written. The Hobbit was written in, I believe, the 30s, and it was very much based on Tolkien's experience with lore, him finding all these little pieces of mythology that he enjoyed reading, and so he kind of made up his own. He took classic Nordic mythology and pagan mythology and Celtic mythology, threw it in a blender, added his own little twists. You can even see parts of JRR Tolkien's character bit in Bilbo, and wrote his own mythology, wrote his own story, a great classic story, and it worked great. And then later, when he was writing Lord of the Rings, it's important to always remember that J.R.R. Tolkien wrote a good portion of Lord of the Rings during World War II. So you can see that the elements of that were more reflective. In fact, World War II is kind of a very weird transition period to where you saw stories more like The Hobbit and the mythology and the tale of kind of almost the invincible hero, the adventure for fun. And then after World War II, it became much more of stories became centrally goal oriented. That everything that happened tended to revolve around that central goal. So it's a good dichotomy looking at the two, and I think that's where people might not like it, is because it is a story about all this crazy stuff that's just happening along the way on this journey, and it's not about getting to the point. Maybe we've become a little impatient over the years, and that's not a fault of Peter Jackson, because, well, the whole point of the story is all the kind of interesting things that happen along the way, especially this one. Perhaps in the next two it'll be a little bit more goal-oriented, if we were to use that terminology. But it's still an enjoyable film, especially if you know that going in, that it's that type of tale, and it's also tonally it's a much different tone. Lord of the Rings is very, very serious. Really has that epic scale. This one's much more lighthearted, bordering on campy every now and then. You have some of the stuff with the. There'll be some minor spoilers in here, but a lot of the stuff with the elves is very much kind of campy. Their humor and such. Well, yeah, except for pretty much any time they're dealing with Thorin, who's rather always serious. But they're singing their songs, which, by the way, is probably the most. The first beginning of this movie, it almost feels like it's going to be a musical, because they're constantly doing these little song number, or well, not constantly, but the movie has like two like singing scenes, and you're kind of at first feeling like, man, this feels like this movie's going to be a musical. But it's really just the two scenes. Although the one with the Bilbo Baggins song probably is the most out of place. The one with the that they sing about their journey about going back to Erebor, and the one that you heard from the trailer is actually rather fitting of the tone. And the way it's used is much more effective. You see kind of Bilbo sitting there debating whether to go on this journey or not, and you hear him hearing them sing about this journey and why they're going on this journey and all this stuff. And it's a much more somber tone story. The other one, not so much. The other one's something you'd expect to see in a musical almost. I mean, it's not overly musical. Like it's not extravagant. But I think that is one scene that'll throw some people off, because it's not followed up on it. It's very different. But there is, of course, more humor throughout the story. The other thing that might throw off is, of course, the fan purists, because they added a good deal to the story. They took a lot of, apparently there were writings that Tolkien's son added, like, that were supposedly missing scenes, because again, and a lot of those scenes dealt with connecting the Hobbit stuff going on during the Hobbit with the Lord of the Rings, because Tolkien did not intend really to write Lord of the Rings when he wrote The Hobbit. It wasn't until later that he decided to write Lord of the Rings as like a sequel, follow up with basically mostly different characters. So it works out that, since Jackson then did Lord of the Rings first, it's become more of it's the advantage that you now really have to tie in this stuff. You can't just show the ring and not play like the ominous music, because the audience knows what the ring is. And in future generations, you want to keep that tone consistent. So when, if let's say it's 10 years from now and you're showing a kid the Lord of the Rings series for the first time, and you're gonna show it in chronological order. You're gonna start with the Hobbit, and when they see that ring, they hear that ominous tone. They kind of know there's something up with it. They're not quite sure though, and it works better, I think, as a solid story that they are doing stuff like that, and they're laying foundations for the bigger stuff to come. We'll see how it all goes. The big thing they're introducing is the necromancer, which I think is a big element. I think he only had a few. I forget how much, if they talked about him. I know that was covered a lot in the stories that Tolkien's son wrote, was about during Gandalf's absence from the Hobbit, the stuff he was doing. Basically him figuring out what's going on with this new power rising, which kind of does tie the events in a bit. The events of the later trilogy with the earlier trilogy. But there's more things that do also break. Well, I think they added some new elements. I'm trying to think if the one orc villain, was he in the original Hobbit, or it might have been something they kind of added. Which, if they added him, I'm sure they added him just so that there is, for the Battle of the Five Armies, that there's like one, there's a central. Oh, we know that guy. villain to it. It's been a while, so I'm not 100% up. Oh yes, back to more tonal differences. You know, I talked about how there are different type of films. Considering how Tolkien and his works basically started the pen and paper RPG, which in turn led to other, pretty much all RPGs after that, you can really compare this to styles of D&D. The two movies, these two stories, are very different. The one is what I like to call the Hobbit. Well, the Lord of the Rings is your extremely well planned out campaign. For a more experienced DM would be running that. Someone he knows the cliffs, he knows the mythology, so he's constantly pulling out stuff, throwing it at you, and it makes sense. It feels like, oh wow, that was established. Oh, you did a good job with that. Oh, and you laid it out how you have to each accomplish all these different tasks. It works really, really well. It's something that you get from an experienced DM. The Hobbit's a less experienced DM, where he's kind of giving you a vague goal, but you and the DM and the party, less experienced, just kind of start doing shit, and so they kind of just start throwing random crap at you, like, well, I don't have anything planned for after we get to the mountain, and you guys really aren't high enough level to kill the dragon yet. So, we'll have to have you have an encounter with a couple of wogs. That's what we'll do for today. Oh wow, I threw way. There's a scene in here where they come across orcs and they can't fight these orcs. There's too many. So it's like, oh wow, I messed up with that. I threw the party into a situation where they really can't kill, and it's kind of my fault. Because as a DM, sometimes you are at fault for making up a scenario which your party isn't high enough level to take on, and you're like, oh crap. I know it's a party wipe, but this is my fault. Party wipe. There's a hole. You see a hole and you can jump down there, and you're like, well, I suppose the orcs can still go down there. Elves show up and kill the orcs. There's stuff like that. It gives a total difference, I guess, of somebody who's like building up and getting the experience. Although we're seeing the earlier experience stuff later. Also, an interesting note on both the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, more the books, is also what I've noticed is their kind of status as true classics over time has seemed to. The Hobbit was very, very popular up until was probably the more popular of the two up until the 70s, maybe in the 80s they made the full transition to over time becoming more Lord of the Rings being considered the better of the two stories. And I think, again, it's a generational preferences there, where The Hobbit is seen more in that classical style. It's the same thing why people complain about certain superheroes. Oh, they're a Superman, they can't be hurt. For a very, very long time, that's the story that everybody wanted to hear, was about the hero that could do no wrong, was the guy that would get stuff done. Perhaps that's a signal that we are so secure in our own safety nowadays. We want to hear about crazy stuff and people having to overcome it because we don't ever have to overcome anything. When you're having tough times, things are rough, you want to hear more about the hero that rectifies everything, gets everything done. So maybe that's a reflection of where we're at society now that we're kind of very set, where we want to hear about the flawed heroes. When things are tough, we want to hear about the perfect heroes. What's another? Oh, I think I heard one or two people complain about this. Oh, Bilbo's kind of taking a back seat to his own story, and yes, that is true. Although I think they did a very good job of showing why he is important here. But that's kind of the point of the character. He is kind of there as the audience foil. It works very well if you think about it. You take someone who is both different. We get a nice little introduction, but who is established because of his race's tendencies, very homebound, and therefore needs to be explained. And we need to follow Bilbo and learn with Bilbo how this great world of Middle Earth works, what it means to be a hero. The only downside with that is, of course, there's a lot of explaining and stuff that needs to be done that isn't as well explained in this. In a novel, it's easy to do that. In a novel, it's easy to dedicate a paragraph or two about why Sting can turn blue. Here they just kind of say it does, or they have the giant rock monsters that are fighting, and you can have very easy without breaking action in the novel to write background on that, right? What these things are, what they're probably fighting over. It's easy to do that. It's easy to add that little bits of information in a novel, which is why normally people like novels, because you can, if you have those moments, it's very easy to fill the audience in on what's exactly going on. It's hard to do that with film. Let's see, anything else on this? I did not see this in 3D. I heard some bad things about the 3D. I think I've established this before. I really don't see films in 3D unless I really can't help it, or there's something really particularly special about seeing it in 3D. I also did not see it in 48 frames per second. I saw it in the standard. It looked good. I think it looked like there was a little bit more use of CGI. I'm not sure if Peter Jackson was one of those guys. I got a lot of respect for him really balancing his CGI use and his practical effects. And he still does use a lot of practical effects, but I would have been happier with more practical effects in this. They have of course, the orc villain, the main orc villain. You could have done him as a makeup job, and I was disappointed that he appeared to be completely CGI, and that a lot of the goblins were CGI as well, while a lot of the other orcs were not. I think he got a little lazy with that. No, and that's the sad thing, is that's normally why CGI is not used, because it's a cheaper solution. Oftentimes practical effects are the cheaper solution. CGI is often used by directors because it's an easier thing to do. It's less stuff that they have to think about. It's less previs. A lot of times they'll talk about how it frees them up in the camera. So I would have been happier. Maybe in the next couple of films. I mean, of course, when there's thousands of creatures running on screen at once, I don't complain when it's CGI. Obviously, you gotta do that. So, where does that... Oh, yes. The rabbit sled. I love that thing. I want one. I want one now. I just don't want to have a bird that's crapping on my head. What was his name? I always get the names. The Brown Wizard. Which that could so be misinterpreted. Wow, I'm looking at the IMDb. I don't even have his name on here, do I? Oh, Radagast. Played by Sylvester McCoy, by the way. Oh, yes, that is one thing I wanted to talk about before I... Oh, Doctor Who. So yeah, Doctor Who is now in Lord of the Rings. Well, I shouldn't be too surprised. We have Dracula as Saruman, which brings me into what I was talking about, the other Lord of the Rings cameos that we get. We've got Saruman in here, and it was nice when you hear him speak. First you have you had the opening with I was happy to see little wow, I had a brain fart right there. I totally forgot the actor's name, even though he's well known. Mr. I'm a robot and gonna kill the crew for the good of the company. What was his name? Oh, Ian. Yeah, Ian Holm. Ian Holm as old Bilbo. He's back. Elijah Wood. You see them in the opening sequence, which is taking place right before the party. Only the weird thing with that is that it's been 10 years since it's been a decade since they filmed it. So now you've got both Elijah Wood and Ian Holm there, looking 10. I mean, they do the makeup job to try to make him look as much like they did, but you can still kind of tell you look a little older than you looked. It's wow. I guess people in the Shire look really crappy in the morning. They really need the sun to be out for a little bit, and they start to look good. But Ian Holm's back. You have Christopher Lee back as Saruman. When you hear his voice, you're like, "Oh, it's Saruman! He's back! Oh yeah!" And of course, it's kind of weird because you know he turns evil. You're used to him being evil, but he's not treated so, and I think that works good for this. Although I think for future generations, it'll be kind of weird when you're just introduced to Saruman all of a sudden, if they're watching it in order. Oh, you're gonna be like, well, who's this guy? I have no idea who this guy is. I mean, they do kind of prepare him a little bit when they ask, "Oh, are there other wizards?" You know, Bilbo asks Gandalf, "Are there other wizards?" And he talks about, he does mention Saruman and stuff, so he's somewhat prepped. They have Galadriel, and Galadriel is really not explained at all, so people will be kind of confused by her. Hugo Weaving back as Elrond. Good to see him. He does a good job as usual. I mean, it's Hugo Weaving, man. Of course, Andy Serkis back as Gollum. Gollum, the scene's probably going to be the highlight of the film. His game of riddles and all that stuff. And his, dragging off a goblin to eat. Nom 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 nom. So I like the film. I'm excited for the next one. It's going to be interesting. The next one is, if I backtrack on here on IMDb so I get the name correct. The Desolation of Smog is the next one. I think, or Smog, yeah, Smog. That one's going to really be centering. The movie, spoiler, ends with them seeing the Lonely Mountain in the distance, so they're close. I have a feeling this one's going to really deal with basically everything with Smog. The approaching island, securing Airborne, and then the final movie is going to deal with the Battle of the Five Armies. And all that fun stuff right there. It'll be interesting to see where they work the necromancer stuff in. Are they going to save that for the third movie, or are they going to kind of wrap that up as the B plot in the second movie? And we do see a bit of the treasure hoard, which is vast, but I'm curious. I had heard that they had used so much gold paint in making this that they almost exhausted the entire supply of the stuff in New Zealand. It looked mostly CGI in this scene, but I'm hoping that in the next movie they use more of a set. That there is a set where I can see, oh wow, I can see why you exhausted an entire country's supply of gold paint. So here's hoping to all that. Oh yes, one last thing before. I realize why there were so many trailers released. Almost all those trailers that we've seen released over the last week or two, all in front of The Hobbit. And really, I want to know who's the marketing guy who decided to put these two movies back to back. But we saw Oblivion. We saw the Oblivion trailer. Okay, Tom Cruise sci-fi epic, alright. Oh, it's that Earth has been wiped out, there's something new, okay. And then the next trailer was the After Earth trailer. And you're going, this is the same, what the they're way too similar to be stuck right next to each other. Was I the only one where that happened? Was that because I know with trailers, a lot of times studios will put the trailers on the film as part of the reel. Well, now it's digital, but it's still attached on there. And so, part of the agreement that they kind of have to do is if it's on the reel when it's sent out, the theaters have to play it. So normally the movies you see right before the trailer are normally consistent because they're all shown as it's a reel attached, so every theater has no choice but to play it. And then other movies, the theater companies will add their own trailers before it coming, for the coming attractions. They normally target it. They know which movies are attached, so they don't repeat trailers. and such. It's a whole thing, but I'm wondering why that was the case in my theater, because that just seems like really poor. Like, you've got two extremely similar movies back to back. People don't like that when they see that. They're like, "Ugh, that's what the Hollywood, no originality." Blah. You don't do that. You want to space them out a little bit. You want to space those movies out by like 2 trailers, not back to back. It's way too obvious to immediately start comparing. I haven't done a reaction trailer to that one yet. I was planning on, busy. Sorry. And then of course we also saw that we got the Pacific Rim. We got Pacific Rim as a trailer. Looks awesome. It's original. It's it, it's great. I should do a thing on why this type of originality is great, because it's really brand new. It's genuinely brand new written. There's actually quite a few that are brand new films, like not based on anything else. Perhaps the sequel, prequel, remake trend has finally broken, and studios are now realizing that they've got to develop new cash cows, and that's original content. I'm hoping that's the case, but they can still make stuff at least based on books like The Hobbit here, taking it back to where we all started. I definitely recommend you see it. It is a long sit. It's about 3 hours. That's not it's a 169-minute runtime. That's not including trailers and such. So I'm not sure if there was an after credits like preview. I think they did that with some of the Lord of the Rings for the next film, because basically I had to go. I had to go by like the hour and a half mark. You know what I mean? You know what I mean by go. I had to go. Bad. I made the mistake of getting the large soda. I drank that thing down in the trailer. I'm like, oh no. And I don't want to get up either. So, I mean, that should be an indicator. It was a movie where I sat for an hour and a half having to go to the bathroom because I didn't want to miss anything on screen. So it's that type of movie. But yeah, because of that, I did not stay for the credits. I was get up, go. Alright, well, let's kind of get this under a half hour. So that's my opinion on that. Stay tuned, of course, for more movie reviews. We've got Les Miserables coming up. We've got Django Unchained coming up. I'm going to try to see both of those. We've got Zero Dark 30 coming up. And then we're into the 2013 movie season, or movie year. I expect now, probably either right after or before the new year, you'll see my retrospective of the year. My top picks, my worst picks, worst movies of the year, best movies of the year. I think I'm going to do things a little differently this year. I'm going to do some bit of category, so I think I'm going to have a couple of my best movies, a couple of the worst movies, and then I'm going to pick like worst remake, best sequel, worst sequel, stuff like that. We'll have our own Oscars. So stay tuned for all that fun stuff. Please subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the podcast. If not, well, I don't know, you listen to a half-hour long thing, you might want to reconsider if you enjoyed this or not. So please like us, please subscribe. It's me sitting in my room. Signing off. Bye.